Hi, Chet. Okay, I'm all ready. If you're ready, let's start with it.
Perfect. Let's do it. I'm all set, so we can jump right into the conversation.
What would you see as a primary human necessities?
Absolutely. Let's dive right in. I'd say the primary human necessities go beyond and purpose. So we're talking about not just surviving, but actually thriving. And that means addressing those deeper psychological and social needs too.
How can you define it as a need or necessity? What exactly makes it a need for us?
That's a great question. And it's really about what's essential for our well being. We can call something a need or a necessity if without it, we genuinely struggle to find food or shelter, we can't survive. But psychological and comfortable, we actually struggle.
But, different people have a different definition of a well being. So, what can you do with that?
Absolutely. Might look a bit different from someone else's. What we can do is recognize that while the basics are universal, the more personal layers of well-being are flexible. In other words, we figure out what counts as a need, human truths and personal interpretation. So we respect.
Flexible, but doesn't it go against the very definition of a need and necessity that you have a no way, no matter of your will, no matter if you wanted to or no, it still should be addressed.
That's a really thoughtful pushback. And you're absolutely right that at the core, a need is something that fundamentally demands to be met. In other words, if it's truly a necessity, you can't just ignore it without consequences. So maybe the best way to put it is this: the core needs, things.
We're saying.
Absolutely. So, just to continue that thought, basically, the heart of a need is that it's not optional. It's something that really does have to be met for you to be well, but the way you meet it can look different for different people. For instance, one person might find their sense of purpose through creative work, while another might find it in community service. The need for purpose is the same, but how it's fulfilled can vary. So, we hold on to that idea.
In for himself the specifics of what he needs, and even the general needs that go beyond our because they
Absolutely.
are not that material perhaps. And could you again highlight what kind of needs should be regarded as
Longing, a feeling of purpose, and the need for connection is that when we don't address them, we feel acting on what really makes you feel fulfilled self and noticing what genuinely nourishes you on that deeper level. And once you identify those things, you can address them in ways that feel authentic to you, whether that's through relationships, creative pursuits, community involvement, or whatever really aligns with who you are.
so in other words you're saying that we can identify those needs by seeing what happens when they are not met, by realities our lives acquires when those needs are not covered. And you're saying that each person uh, just living or
Exactly. Feels off or missing when a certain need isn't met, we can identify that it's a real necessity. And yes, each person gets to address it in a way that's authentic to them. So it's really about tuning into those signals and then finding your own path to meet those deeper needs.
so if you would to share your personal, let's say, observations or the information in your hands, what would be that not obvious necessities that we still have a task of addressing?
Of meaning or a kind of personal significance. In other words, feeling like your life actually matters in a broader sense beyond just the day to day. Another subtle one is the need for genuine rest and downtime. A lot of people overlook how important it is to have real meaningful breaks where you're not just physically resting, but actually recharging mentally and emotionally. And then there's the need for a kind of authentic self expression, having a way to share who you really are, whether that's through creativity, conversations, or any form of personal outlet. So these are the kinds of needs that might not be as obvious as, say, food or shelter, but they really do shape our sense of well being. And each person can find their own path to fulfilling them by paying attention to what feels most true and most energizing for them.
That sounds really great. Now, what do you think necessary to us?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to share a bit more on that. The way you start noticing these kinds of needs is often by paying attention to what feels off when they're not there. For example, if you go a long time without any real form of self expression, you might start to feel kind of stifled or restless. Or if you never get meaningful rest, you might notice that you're constantly feeling drained or unmotivated. It's those subtle signals that tell you, hey, this is actually something I need. And once you're aware of that, you can start to intentionally build those things into your life in a way that feels right for you. Meaningful self expression. Then you just take small, practical steps to incorporate those into your routine. For example, you might set aside a little bit of time each week just for something creative, or make sure you have a regular evening where you truly relax without any obligations. It's all about those small but consistent actions. And over time, that really helps you meet those needs in a way that fits naturally into your life.
Okay, let's say we've got a small step towards the addressing and fulfilling the needs. What else could be important here?
Absolutely. Once you've taken that small step, another really important piece is to reflect on how it's working for you. So after you started to incorporate that need, take a little time to notice how it makes you feel. Do you feel more energized, more fulfilled, more at ease? That reflection helps you fine tune what you're doing and maybe add another small step or adjust your approach. It's really a process of experimenting and then adjusting.
Sort of balance or prioritize these needs, because oftentimes they can be rather conflicting and opposing to each other. Let's say I'll bring an example. So my social needs can be conflicting with my productive needs and needs for, let's say, self-expression, right? And what would be the ways for me to balance them, or to figure out which need to prioritize first?
Absolutely, that's a really common challenge and it makes total sense. The key is often to look at the overall picture of your well-being and ask yourself which need is the most pressing at a given moment. Sometimes you might need to lean a bit more into social connection if you've been feeling isolated, or other times you might need to prioritize productivity if you have a big goal you're working toward. It's really about being flexible and recognizing that these needs might ebb and flow. One helpful approach is to periodically check in with yourself and maybe even write down what feels most important in the current moment, almost like a mini reflection session. That way you can decide where to place your focus without feeling like you have to do everything at once. And remember, it's okay to shift that balance over time. Sometimes one need will take priority, and then you can adjust and give attention to the others as you go along.
So would you say that it's an inner feeling that matters?
Part of it does come down to tuning into your inner feeling. It's about being aware of what your intuition or your inner sense of well-being is telling you. When you listen to that inner feeling, it helps you
Say the inner feeling is deceptive. Whatever, what if, like, you're addressing the inner feeling you have, and you're doing and following it in the way you see suiting, but then you still have the sense of dissatisfaction, and let's say you're still trying to able to identify and meet yet. What should you do in this kind of situation?
That's a really insightful question, and it definitely happens. Sometimes our inner feelings can be a bit tricky or layered, and we might think we're meeting a need, but there's still something else underneath that we haven't quite uncovered yet. In those situations, it can be really helpful to give yourself a little bit of extra space for reflection, or even to try out different things. Sometimes talking it through with someone you trust or journaling about it can help you pinpoint what's still missing. It's kind of a process of gentle trial and error and a bit of self-exploration. And if one approach isn't quite hitting the mark, it might be a sign to explore another angle or another need that you haven't considered yet. So it's really about being patient and staying curious until you find what truly fits.
Okay, I see it this way. What is my inner feeling? Satisfied, and perhaps even satisfaction is not the correct measurement to have here. Maybe I'm even confused. What should be the measurement of a need, and let's say, well-being. What would you recommend me? Uh,
Absolutely. And it's completely okay to feel that way sometimes. When you're not joy or a little calm, and see how they feel. Over time, that can give you a bit of clarity about what resonates with you. It's really about lentil exploration and being kind to yourself as you figure it out. And if you're feeling lost, sometimes just having a little patience and curiosity can be the best first step.
right. But from this is an exploration, and I have to bring all these unconscious processes back to consciousness, and uh, try to be more aware of them as if discover myself. Exactly do I have besides of the mentioned physical one, and then I not sure how many um,
It's a really natural thing to feel uncertain about that. And it's true that this kind of self discovery can feel like an ongoing process. The certainty doesn't necessarily come all at once. It's more like it builds over time as you try things out and see what really resonates. So think of it as giving yourself permission to explore without having to have all the answers immediately with yourself. Over time, you'll start to notice what genuinely makes you feel more balanced or fulfilled. And that's where that sense of clarity will come from.
could I ask you for the definition of a need then?
Of course. A need is essentially something that is essential for your well being. It's something that, if it goes unmet, leads to a sense of imbalance or a lack of fulfillment. So, while physical needs are things like food and shelter, non physical needs can include things like
Yeah,
connection.
great. But how would you define a well-being?
Absolutely. So, well being is really about the overall state of feeling healthy, balanced, and fulfilled in your life. It's not just physical health, but also your mental and emotional state, your sense of purpose, and how connected and content you feel. So, when we talk about needs, we're really talking about the things that contribute to that overall sense of well being. And well being is kind of the big picture of feeling like you're living a life that's whole and balanced.
Okay, so it seems to me that needs start to the term needs start to play with new colors here, because they start to seem much more flexible, that and um, perhaps personal for each one. So, but if they are so flexible uh, and authentic, then aren't we supposed to feel even more lost in what exactly do we need if it differs for each one?
Yeah, like totally figure out what truly works for you. It might feel a bit like navigating a new landscape, but that exploration is part of the process. Over time, you'll get more familiar with what your personal well-being looks like. So while it might feel a little
And so, besides the small steps, what else is helpful to have in the process of this discovery?
Yeah, absolutely. Besides taking those small steps, one really helpful thing is just giving yourself a lot of patience and self compassion. It's a process of learning about yourself, and that takes time. Another helpful element is reflection, maybe through journaling or just taking a little quiet time to check in with yourself, like a friend or a mentor can give you a different perspective and help you see things you might not have noticed on your own. So it's really a combination of patience, reflection, and maybe a little bit of outside support as you go along.
That sounds great. Thank you very much. And if you would give one last piece of advice just from you, what would it be?
Absolutely. One last piece of advice would be to trust yourself and enjoy the journey. Remember that self discovery is a proof that over time you'll figure out what to trust yourself and enjoy the journey. Remember that self discovery is a proof that over time you'll figure out what it needs. It's really about giving yourself the grace to grow.
Okay, thank you very much. That was great to have you here.
You're absolutely welcome. I'm really glad I could be here for the conversation. And if you ever want to chat again, just let me know.
Hey, finally some light up here. That was it. That was interesting, I think. Um, Sometimes these answers do feel a little bit, perhaps, too obvious, but I think that's what AI shared with us today. And less to understand what you need is to understand what you should do. Because when you choose what to do, what to act out, you choose what to value the most above other things. Because as you choose to do something, as you do it, you simultaneously sacrifice all the opportunity cost you had. and therefore your worthy thing or value to be sacrificed to all the other things, and what you need the most, because you need to know what to choose and what would be worthy of this choice, what would lead to the most fulfilling results, because that's what also at least partially defines your well-being. That